canal de cocina canábica. Oña de ganja, sensimilla, pascolo, sativa, kush, mezcal de María, pal coco, esa flor de hemp que marihuana cocina, canábica de reefer, la mota medica, canal de comida de flor, skunk indica el olor, mira, yo la consúmelo, medica.
Yeah, yo, chequea. How you doing? My name is Raúl Moris. I am Chef Raúl Moris, straight from Puerto Rico. I just recently released a book called La Alquimia del Sofrito Cannábico. It's a book on cannabis Caribbean cooking. Cannabis Caribbean cooking, which means it has cannabis flavoring, it has cannabis potencies or flower, it has cannabis THC, CBD, and all the other cannabinoids. We've been doing this for the last 4 years. We've been cooking cannabis. I got a certification. I got 7 certifications. I'm also a professor of graphic design. 7 certifications on cannabis, everything from running a business to bud tending and all that other good stuff, and obviously cooking. And we've been doing the investigating part of how to cook cannabis Caribbean cooking, because I think there's one other book in the Caribbean that was written, the daughter of Bob Marley, the great reggae artist Bob Marley. I think his daughter wrote a book. This book, La Alquimia del Sofrito Cannábico, is also a cooking book on Caribbean cooking, Caribbean dishes, Caribbean sofrito. It includes Mexico, it includes Cuba, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. I did some taquitos, I have some sangria. The book is really full, so it's got a lot of flavor. It's got a lot of Caribbean flavor. We're going to talk about today specifically. Oh, you can visit us at our Canal de Cocina Canábica. That's our YouTube channel. Canal as in channel. Cocina, cooking. Cannabis cooking. Canal Cocina Canábica. The kitchen cannabis channel. That's the translation. And you're going to have different recipes made by me specifically, like what you're watching right now. So we're gonna talk about that. We're also going to talk about the measuring part. I don't think there is another cooking chef in the world that has defined a protocol on how to measure your cannabis or the potency of your cannabis inside of your cooking, inside of your meals, inside of your food as medicine. I don't think no one's done that. We put together, like I've mentioned before, I'm a professor, but I'm also a social worker. I'm also a cook. I'm also a chef. I also do poetry performances and all that stuff. And then I started to think about this because I actually went to Spain a couple of years ago, and I asked one of those renowned chefs over there specifically this question: how do I measure? How do I measure? And you know, he basically answered really honestly. He says there is no one way. But as a chef, I said I'm going to put this together, I'm going to think about it. And one night, in the middle of the night, I woke up with, wow, boom, I had the idea. I had exactly what it is that I wanted to present to the people. And there's a chapter in my book that specifically talks about the 5 pillars of cannabis cooking, and how to measure, how to use, how to understand the weight system within the cannabis world that already exists, and how to translate that into products that you're going to eventually use in your food. So we're going to talk about that specifically. We're going to talk about the weigh-in, and we're going to talk about how important that is to understand how much of whatever it is that you want in your, and we're going to talk about strains, we're going to talk about THC, we're going to talk about CBD, we're going to talk about the cannabinoids, and we are going to talk about how to make canna butter. We're going to do all that in a brief, precisely because we want you to have a great experience while you're consuming cannabis. We don't want you to have a bad experience and then say, look, this was horrible, I didn't have a great time, I got really high, I couldn't handle it, I got a bad trip, that kind of thing. We can do something to prevent that. And this is what we're going to talk about right now. Here we go. Okay, there's 5 pillars that I'm going to be adding more to the pillars, but what I wanted to do was have a format, and I thought of 5 elements that are individual to everyone, mostly, and define what cannabis does to your body. Important. They're not limited to, and we always start off slow. I mean, that's basically the golden rule. You start off with the lowest dosage so you can move your way up. You can always move your way up. You can always add to your high, which means that if you want to get higher, you can add to it and then have certain control. It's a lot like alcohol for people who drink. Like, you know, like I know I drink wine, for example, or I drink beer. I know 5 beers are going to get me the way that I can have control. I can drink 5 beers, maybe 3 glasses of wine, and I can feel and I can understand and I can function. I can't drive, obviously, but I can do, and I can, if I drank 10 or 2 bottles of wine, I know that's beyond my capabilities of handling. So then I'm going to be drunk, and I don't want to be drunk. So it's the same thing with the cannabis. You want to learn what it is for each specific person, how much it is that you need to consume to have control and be able to function. All right. So here's the first thing you need to understand. Not all weed is the same. Not all weed is the same. All right. So one of the wonderful things that happen precisely with this legalizing in certain states marijuana or cannabis. You know, marijuana and cannabis are the same thing. In case you didn't know, people are using cannabis now because of the stigma marijuana plant and the marijuana word, and talked about marijuana has had for the last 70 years. The principal thing that happened, or the best thing that happened from the cannabis legalization, is the quality of the product, which means that nowadays people are getting really good weed. The scientific, the experimental, the let's find out what else we can do with this plant. It's going on right now. So people are coming up with really great strains. When you hear the word strains, it means the variety of that particular strain. There are thousands of strains. In Puerto Rico, there are over 4,000 strains. And this is just a small little island. I can't imagine what it is in California or Colorado or other states or other parts of the world where cannabis has been for a while and it's legal now, and it's being really experimented on. I mean, people are crossing the strains, and that's how they come up with new strains. So not all marijuana is the same, which means that you can smoke one marijuana bud today and you can smoke a different bud tomorrow of a different strain, and you won't feel the same effect. Why? Even if you smoke the same amount, you won't feel the same because of the strain. Each strain has potency of cannabinoids, different levels. For example, what are cannabinoids? Well, one particular cannabinoid you've all heard about, the THC cannabinoid, which is the one that gives you the high effect. The high comes from the THC. So if it has more THC, your bud, your strain your weed has more THC. It could be anywhere between 20 to 90% THC, right? And then the other cannabinoids, CBD, for example, that's another well-known one that doesn't give you a high, but it's also, it's a contrabalance between CBD and THC. So if you got a 50-50 strain where you have 50% THC, 50% CBD, it's gonna contra your effect or your high if you have an 80%, for example, of THC in that strain. And like I said, there are hundreds of strains. So there's a good question that you want to ask when you get your bud, when you get your weed, when you get your strain, when you go buy your product. How much THC does it have? How much CBD does it have? All of this, you need to understand when you go buy your product. And this is something that we've learned and we're learning more and more of. So when you go buy a strain, you make sure that you ask the guy how much THC. So that's gonna actually, this is what I do when I find a new strain that I've not tried. I smoke a little bit, just a little itty bitty bit. I'll smoke a little bit so I'll understand the high that particular plant, that particular strain, that particular bud gives me. And I know now what it's gonna do inside of my food. This is something that I have to do. I have to do it, right? Not a problem. I'll smoke and let you know what it feels like. There are strains that I love, for example. I love Girl Scout cookies. It's a great body high. I love Gorilla Glue. It's a real high. It's a real strong high. So it's called Gorilla Glue. I guess it's because it's has a lot of THC. So there's strains that I'll ask for by name, like Girl Scout cookies, you know. But there's so many different strains, and find your strain, your favorite strain, and then you can use that into your food. All right, THC. The second thing you need to understand, and I've already mentioned it, is quantity. How much of your bud, how much of your weed you are going to use inside of your vehicle or product. When I talk about vehicles, I talk about things that have fats, mainly because you can do it also with alcohol. But specifically in this class, in this conversation, we're going to talk about olive oil, right? One of the great vehicles that people use to extract something called decarb, which is what we're going to do when we cook it. When you use olive oil, when you use milk, when you use butter, there's specifically in the United States and in Puerto Rico, there's specific sizes that come. I will use, for example, 17 ounces of good quality olive oil. Obviously should be good because you're going to put your weed into it. To extract, to decarb my weed. And how much weed I'm going to decarb will depend on those 5 elements. So I'm asking and I'm telling you the quality. We talked about the strains. We talked about the quantity. That's number 2. How much of weed are you going to use inside your vehicle? Obviously, how much of that liquid vehicle you're using. Milk, I mean, if you're using 17 ounces or if you're using 64 ounces of oil, then it's going to dilute your weed into more of that oil, and it's going to have less potency when you use it. Those are strategies that you want to learn to be able to use in your cooking. But I always say, and I will repeat this several times, use the least amount of weed into your vehicle, which means that you can always add to your salad more olive oil and you'll be able to control the high. So that's number 3, right? We talked about strains, we talked about vehicles, and we talked about quantities. Quantities, how much of the weed. I'm going to be more specific to that in a minute. You also want to talk about people's personalities. You know, there are people who are prone to happiness and prone to being sad, or people whose personality is extroverted. So there are people that certain strains you can even contact and define. You can say, wait a minute, I want to relax. Like my personality is extroverted, so I want to relax. So that's why I use Girl Scout cookies, because it gives me a nice body high, which means I reduce voltage, I reduce speed, I reduce my brain from working so quickly. All of that I take into account. So that's another one of those important pillars that you need to take into account. Personality. So if you have people who want to be, because you can smoke weed and you can feel high in an active way, or you can bring yourself low in a low bottom, relax, flow kind of way. So that's number 4, which is the personality. And you're going to also talk about the weight of the person. So you're talking about, if I'm a person who's 6 feet and weighs 200 pounds or 210 pounds, I'm going to need more to be able to get just as high as someone who is probably half of my stature, half my weight. Important. So those are the pillars. Strain, which means how much THC, CBD, how much of the cannabinoids, and you'll ask that question when you buy your weed, and they will be able to answer that. You want to talk about quantity, how much weed. It's not the same if you're using a whole ounce as to using 7 ounces. 1 gram, 7 ounces. It's not the same, right? So you want to be able to define that. We talked about the strains, we talked about the quantity, we talked about the vehicle. The best vehicle to extract the potency of weed, I've understood and I've found, is coconut oil. Coconut oil, coconut milk has more fat, so it extracts more. It needs fat to be extract to extract the potency of the product. So milk, yogurt will work, olive oil will work, regular oil will work, butter obviously has enough fat. This is probably the second most. I'm between the coconut oil and olive oil and butter. These are probably like my favorites, except if I'm going to do like pastries, which I'll use dairy products or coconut for. So those are your 5 principal elements: weight, personality, strain, quantity, equality, and quality. Those are 5 strains. I'll be adding more to that, but those are the ones that you need to be attentive to really concentrate on, so you can be able to identify that. All right, so you define what it is that you're going to do. You need to understand that, because that's going to help you reduce the possibilities of places or vehicles. So if you're going to do something that is, you're going to cook something that requires oil, you need to understand that probably using a good quality olive oil is the best resource. So I'm gonna use olive oil, although I could be talking about milk, or I could be talking about coconut milk, or even butter, right? But I'm gonna be specifically concentrating on the 17 ounces. 17 ounces. This in the US is probably the biggest quantity. It's 28 grams, which is 1 ounce, is probably the standard quantity of weed that you can ask for. You can go as low as 1 gram, right? This is 28, but you can go as low as 1 gram. This right here, it's about 7. It's about 7. And when you go and purchase it, they will ask you, what do you want? Half a gram, a quarter, what do you want? Half an ounce, what do you want? A quarter, what do you want? And they'll depend. This, I think, in the US is probably like, of good weed, something like 50, 60 bucks, right? And It's a quarter, right? So it's 50, 60 bucks, more or less what you pay in the US. This probably costs anywhere between 200 and 300, depending on the quality, which we mentioned earlier. All right. So if I was gonna do it for myself, I'm gonna start off with the lowest, right? I can go lower than this, but this is more or less 7 grams. It's a good distribution. I can, if it was the first time I was trying it out, I would probably use like an eighth, which is 3.5 grams, right? In this. So all of that oil will be infused. And when we talk about infusions, when we're talking about infusing something, we're talking about extractions. We want to extract the THC, the CBD, we want to extract the potency from your weed. That's called decarb. And how do you do that? Well, I go old school. So most people use aluminum foil. All right, old school. Here's my quarter right here. My 7 grams of weed. Remember, you want to ask what kind of strain it is so you know how potent it is, right? I'm going to make a little envelope in this aluminum. Loosely. So my weed's in here. It's green. It's cleaned up. Make sure it doesn't have any seeds. I usually crumble it up so it's nice and loose. So, you know, usually the flour comes in, it's really tight. You want to break that up and then put it inside an envelope. Put this in the oven or in a toaster for 20 minutes at 250 in US Fahrenheit, 250. So you want to put that for 20 minutes. Be close by, because once you finish with those 20 minutes, you're going to want to turn it off. You want to turn off the heat, pull it out, and let it breathe a little bit. If you did it right, it shouldn't have burned. You don't want to burn your weed because you lose your weed. You want to have it nice and cooked, but not burnt, right? After those 45 minutes, now we're going to take the olive oil in something called the Baño de Maria. You want to fill that up with water. You want to put that up maybe 8, 9, close to high. And then you want to have something on top of that water where you're going to put your already cooked weed. This is exactly how I do it. Then you're going to have that cooking going on inside that capsule. See that? There's no water here. I put my olive oil there. All of my olive oil is on there. Close it. And then I'm going to cook this for anywhere between 2 to 3 hours. After that's cooked, after the oil is cooked, you're going to see the oil change colors. It's going to be a darker olive oil. Then you want to filter this. You want to extract, you want to take out the green stuff. You want to take out the weed. So you want to have tools. For example, this is what I use for my straining. Then make sure it's off and it's not as hot. You want to eventually take that oil, drain it, get all the stuff, all the chunky stuff, all the green stuff out of it, all the vegetation stuff out of it. And that oil, now it's going to be decarb. That's what decarb. You can do that with oil, you can do that with milk, you can do that with butter, you can do that. And if you want to see more videos, you can go to my channel. I go through the whole process instead of explaining it. So I've asked already, This is the most simplest method. There's machines for this now. I don't use them. I go and I use the old strategies and the old ways to putting this stuff together because my channel is directed for people who don't have all these facilities where you can get good weed, you can get good oil, and you have the tools in your house to be able to pull this stuff and put this stuff together. You want the best weed. You want to define a small amount of weed to be able to take to your largest amount of vehicle or your oil or your butter or your milk. You're going to take your weed, you're going to put it inside an envelope made out of aluminum foil, put it inside your oven for 250 degrees for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. You want to take it out, let it cool off, bring it into your baño de Maria, and then you're going to wait you're going to wait and you're going to cook that for 2 to 3 hours. Once that's cooked, you're going to strain it. And once you strain it, that oil, you're going to probably put back inside the, or wherever you want to save it. I've had oil in good taste and good quality and good effect for a year, but I keep it in the fridge. So once I decarb it, I've already changed the normal status of the normal status of the oil, and then I put it in the fridge so it won't go bad. And if you use good weed and if you spend time, it's going to take you 3 hours, 2 hours to pull this whole thing together. You want to put it in the fridge to save it for a long time. I think that's pretty much it. If you got any questions, please make sure you contact me using my Marijuana Medicinal PR, Marijuana with an H, Medicinal, which is written the same way, PR. That's my Facebook, that's my Instagram, and you can also write me on our channel, El Canal de Cocina Cannábica, Cannabis Cooking Channel. You can find us there, and if not, you can look for us on social media. We're La Alquimia del Sofrito Cannábico. I am Chef Raúl Moris, Puerto Rico's only, as far as I know, only cooking chef, or at least the most known cooking chef on the island. Thank you. Have a wonderful event. Have a wonderful time. And let's earth dance our butts away. All right? Yeah, yo.